Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Better Questions, a virtual event hosted by Route 16. The Better Questions is all about if you are contemplating making a platform move today to Microsoft Dynamics, what are the questions you should be asking yourself as you're considering making this move? We are Route 16. My name is Ariel Upton. I am the head of growth here at Route 16, and I am joined by two of my wonderful colleagues, Brendan Landers, one of our co-founders and principals, as well as Dustin Beckwith, our service practice lead. The three of us all work at a firm called Route 16, where we help our clients build solutions with Dynamics 365 customer engagement, Power Platform, AI agents, and Copilot Studio. But a little bit about our history and why we have a lot of experience in this topic, talking about platform migrations and implementing Microsoft Dynamics, is all three of us have a shared history. We together worked at a firm called Sonoma Partners. Sonoma Partners was unique in that we had both a Microsoft and a Salesforce practice. So we helped customers evaluate and implement both. So we have experience kind of talking the two platform game. At Route 16, we are 100% focused on Microsoft. Like I mentioned, 100% dedicated to 365 CE, Power Platform, Copilot Studio. And so with that, we are very candid that we are biased, right? So what we do every single day for our clients is build solutions with the Microsoft platform. But we don't want this to be a commercial. What we want this to be is a shared kind of perspective and observations and our learnings about what we experience and what we hear from our prospects and customers who are considering a migration, or they're looking at their platform and making an evaluation. So today's Better Questions is we've broken this up into three parts. We're going to very briefly cover on the questions and conversations of yesterday. So think 3, 5, 8, 10 plus years ago, kind of some of the dominant themes that we all remember having these conversations and questions we would get from prospects. Then we want to talk about the themes of the questions that we're getting today. And then we want to talk about the questions of where we're going for tomorrow and what our customers, our prospects, what we're asking as we move into the future where we all want to go with our businesses. So very quickly, let's start with yesterday's questions. So again, these are in the past, looking backwards. We don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but think the context is important. So some of these questions we used to get really focused on this specific platform. What can that specific platform do for us? What can that specific tool do for us? And a lot of questions around, are you seeing other companies like ours using Dynamics 365? A lot of comparison. Who else like us is doing this? Questions when it came to migration, can we bring everything over? Everything that once was, can it still be? Is there this checkbox if we're doing something exactly how we are today, can we do it the exact same way tomorrow? A lot of questions around out-of-the-box functionality versus the need for significant customization. And then, I love this one that Dustin kind of shared is like, can you partner? Give us a specific yes, no answer on whether you think Dynamics is a good fit for us. So a lot of kind of looking at these questions, very specific, very much focused on that, kind of single tool, single platform. And then I think it's important to kind of talk about the theme of these conversations is that there was a lot more intense conversation and comparison around feature functions. And this is where platforms were very different. If you remember, a Gartner chart, from 10 years ago, there was a lot of distance between leading platforms. That distance has really shrunk, and we've really found that there's parity across all of the leading platforms on a lot of the functionality. There used to be a lot of interest in industry-specific solutions, highly customized clouds, highly customized offerings, very much picking tools based on an industry rather than finding a best in breed, whether it was a solution for horizontal across the market. As any decision, emotion always plays a part. So a lot of conversation around we buy what we know, or we buy what our team is comfortable with. A lot of emotion, right? It's a decision-making process. Maybe buying tools that our team is already familiar working with versus what is best for the business. And then finally, today, we're really talking about sales and service. And a lot of these conversations used to just really be this heavy emphasis on traditional CRM needs. And what we're really seeing now, this kind of how are we building the right platform? How are we building the right underlying data structure? So whatever UI is sitting on top of it, whether we're talking about headless CRM, as that concept is emerging into the conversation, we're really looking at a broader lens of what we're looking at. So the last, we get a lot of questions today, but we really kind of put this together towards 4 key themes. And after I introduce these, Dustin's going to start walking them through this. But of course, the concept of what is this going to cost me? Costs should always be a consideration in every platform conversation. It always is. It's important. It was then, it is now, it will be tomorrow. But really this concept of what is this going to cost me, and looking at it from a different lens today than maybe we did yesterday. The second is this question around, are you a Microsoft shop? It is very common that we hear in the sales process, we are a Microsoft shop, except we use X for CRM, or we use Y for customer service. And what we're seeing is that more and more people, if they're adopting that single Microsoft environment, it makes a lot of sense to keep leaning into that identity as a Microsoft shop. The third is, what does good look like? And this is where partners like ourselves and the entire partner ecosystem play a really pivotal role. And we see all of these projects across all of our customer bases, across a wide variety of industries, to help you understand what does good look like. So rather than, where yesterday we were like, can we do everything we did then? Can we do it now? It's actually, what does good look like for our business, and how do we get there? And then 4, a little buzzwordy, of course, but how serious are you about AI? If this question should be at the top of our minds as we're making any decisions around platforms, tools, solutions today, every business of every size, because things are changing so quickly, and how AI comes into each of these decisions is so key, so that you're not making decisions that are outdated in 6, 12 months, and that you're actually leveraging to an advantage for what you're building for tomorrow. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dustin to start talking about a little bit more about each of these themes.
Thank you, Ariel. We want to start exactly where customers usually start, not where we wish they would start, and that's cost. This isn't an uncomfortable or impolite topic. It's actually going to be the first question the CFO, CIO, and executive decision makers are asking, whether they say it out loud to you or not. When we talk about cost, we try to be very clear that it's not just a licensing conversation. There are 3 buckets that always matter: licenses, implementation cost, and ongoing maintenance. Implementation is where the surprises tend to show up. Maintenance is where the creep usually happens over time, and licenses are what everyone sees first, but they're rarely the full story. The headline price is almost never the true cost of ownership. The real work is understanding how those 3 buckets interact over time and how predictable or unpredictable they are. Once you step back and look at total cost over time, these reactions start to make a lot more sense. So we've got some quotes on our next slide here. These quotes are real. We hear them verbatim from customers and prospects across industries, company sizes, and maturity levels. This isn't a new conversation, but the compounding nature of cost has changed. You've got per user pricing that grows as teams grow, add-ons that multiply, and then the often overlooked cost, the people required to actually run the platform. Salesforce in particular built an entire ecosystem around the admin role. So whether you explicitly budget for it or not, you're paying for that expertise internally or externally. And usually it's not one thing. It's all of them hitting the P&L at once. So that's why it's important to say this clearly. Cost fatigue is legitimate. It's not a negotiating tactic. It's a real operating concern for clients looking at these platforms. That's why it's important to move past anecdotes and look at cost across the full platform lifecycle. As we move on here, every platform on this slide can work. The difference is how and when the costs are going to show up. Some platforms are inexpensive to start, but expensive to extend. Others look reasonable until you look at customization, integrations, or consumption-based pricing kicks in. What we want people to take away here is this. Predictability matters just as much as price. When cost becomes harder to explain year over year, trust erodes, even if the technology itself is solid. That's why we encourage teams to look beyond your traditional feature checklist and focused on the total cost of ownership across licensing, delivery, and ongoing operations. And this is usually the point where people step back and ask a more fundamental question. Are you a Microsoft shop? So this question comes up constantly, and it's usually more revealing than it sounds. Ariel touched on this at the beginning. Most organizations are already using Microsoft products across the business. Outlook, Teams, Excel, Power BI, SharePoint, Copilot. It's already a part of how work gets done. So the question isn't, are you a Microsoft shop? It's whether you're paying twice for the same capabilities because your stack is fragmented. Every additional system is going to need more integrations, more data handoffs, and more things to support, which means more cost hiding in plain sight. We also ask, how many places does your data actually live today? And how confident are you that it's consistent? The tools matter, but clarity matters more, which leads us to what good really looks like. Technology does not solve problems on its own. Those of us who have implemented in these platforms know that. Technology is going to amplify whatever clarity or lack of clarity already exists. Most organizations don't have a tool problem, it's a focus problem. As teams have more tools and more distractions now than ever, especially as AI is booming, good starts with a clear North Star. So that means being honest about what isn't working, what outcomes actually matter, and what you're willing to stop doing. Without that clarity, any platform, no matter how powerful, is just another layer of noise for your employees. Because without that foundation, AI doesn't simplify things, it's going to amplify the complexity as our data is fragmented. So our last question is, how serious are you about AI? Sounds like a buzzword question, as Ariel mentioned, but it's not. AI, agents, apps, and automation all depend on good, consistent data, and there's no shortcut to that. A fragmented stack creates fragmented data, which means you're fighting an uphill battle before you even write a single prompt. Every tool you add introduces another data silo, another integration, and another thing that can break. So the real question is, do you want AI? It's, what does your data model look like when AI actually needs to use it? Serious AI outcomes come from intentional platform choices, not layering shiny tools on top of existing complexity. So when you put all this together, cost predictability, platform focus, data consistency, and AI readiness, what we're really talking about is setting yourself up not just for today's decisions, but for what's going to come next. That's where I want to hand it back to Brendan. He's going to walk through the questions that organizations should be asking next, not just about platforms, but about how they position themselves for the future.
Thank you, Dustin. All right, so some of our thoughts, and some organizations are asking tomorrow's questions today, but we spent some time on questions driving platform decisions we typically see, and that's what Dustin covered. Now we want to shift to sort of the leading edge companies. The questions they're asking, the stuff that doesn't always come up in the evals, but probably should be considered. So there's three of them here. What is your human plus AI labor strategy? Secondly, how do you measure AI quality? And thirdly, predictive versus reactive service and how you're thinking about that. We'll go into each of one of these in more detail in a second, but before we do, I just want to say none of these are hypothetical at this point. They're real decisions companies are making right now, and they have direct implications for which platform you pick and how you sort of configure it. I'd argue it's more important than ever to be forward-thinking, given the freakish pace of innovation. Honestly, it's just really hard to keep up with, even for us that are dealing with it on a daily basis. So let's walk through each one in more detail. On slide 12 here, the next slide. This is all about how are you thinking about human plus AI labor strategy. So the companies that are really ahead on this have moved past sort of the question of, will AI replace my agents? That question is kind of yesterday's news. The better question, and the one we think worth spending real time on, is what's the right mix, and how do you design your workflows and workforce around it, frankly. So autonomous agents handling tier 1 cases is happening today, in some cases tier 2. That's not a future state, right? That's happening now. So if you're making a platform decision without a clean answer to the labor strategy question, there's a real chance you're going to be revisiting that decision down the road, maybe 12 or 18 months. From a Microsoft perspective, and as Ariel mentioned, we're biased. Copilot Studio and the autonomous agent capabilities are directly in play here. It's honestly one of the bigger differentiators we're seeing when companies do a real evaluation, not just sort of does it have AI, but how does the AI fit into the way your people actually work today, or the way they may work tomorrow. The next question on slide 13 is, how do you measure AI quality? This one trips up almost everybody. And I say that without judgment because it's genuinely hard. Most organizations have gotten pretty good at measuring agent performance, handle time, CSAT, first contact resolution, all the usual stuff. What almost nobody has figured out yet is a rigorous way to evaluate how their AI is actually performing. And are the outputs good? Is it catching edge cases? Is it actually improving over time, or is it just running? So what does it mean? I'll give you a few examples here. So one is sort of containment versus resolution. What that means is, did the AI actually solve the problem, or just exhaust the customer into giving up? Big difference. Second is fallback confusion rate. How often is the AI saying things like, I didn't understand that, or looping? Next example of escalation reason tagging. When humans take over, and why do they take over, right? So categorizing and looking at trends, auditing output, random sampling, reviewing of AI responses, regression testing, et cetera, et cetera. AI is changing constantly, so we need to be testing, quite often, more often than traditionally we need to. Lastly, hallucination tracking. Is the AI saying things that are factually wrong, or maybe we shouldn't be serving up? So deploying AI and then wondering why it's not working is a real challenge we see. Again, I think most companies are just doing AI or want to be doing AI, and it's not just a set it and forget it type of thing. So the answer is usually, when there are issues, the answer is usually not the AI itself. It's that there is no measurement framework in place to define what working even means. So going in with a point of view on this, even a rough one, makes a huge difference. It's on our radar, and we think it should be on yours too. And know it'll evolve. These questions will evolve. The next slide, how are you thinking about predictive versus reactive service? And this is probably the most forward-looking of the three. Contact centers pulling ahead right now aren't just answering calls faster. They're identifying the issue before the customer knows they even have one. That shift from sort of how fast can we answer to how often do we prevent the call entirely is fundamentally different design challenge. And I would argue, how do we prevent the call entirely and not leave the customer with a bad taste in their mouth? It is a big change. So call deflection, been around forever, but actually making it a desired method of servicing a customer where the customer truly wants it is a sort of game changer. And all of these things have real implications for platform selections and platform evaluations. So if things like proactive outreach, predictive routing, signal-based triggers aren't part of the conversation when you're evaluating tools, and I'll give you some examples in a second, there's a chance you're building a model that's already starting to become obsolete. So as I mentioned, a few examples. So proactive outreach, things like a SaaS platform detecting a user hasn't logged in for a few weeks. Customer service can reach out before they churn, or a more traditional example of a bank noticing an unusual spending pattern and proactive fraud alerts instead of waiting for a dispute. We may have all experienced that already. Or a utility company see some usage spike, reaching out to a potential leak before the bill arrives. Those are all proactive, right? Predictive routing, when we think about that, we think about things like customers calling in and his system knows they've had 2 failed self-service attempts. So therefore it routes to a senior agent, not to the queue, or a high value account detected. So skipping the standard IVR and going straight to a dedicated rep. Sentiment analysis, flagging an angry tone in the first X number of seconds and routing as a result. Or lastly, this is very typical, customer in a mid-renewal cycle routes to somebody with upsell context, not just support. And lastly, signal-based triggers. So things where usage drops, let's say below a certain threshold, 3 months in a row, it triggers a success check-in. Contract renewal, 90 days out, there's been no engagement log, triggers an outreach sequence. Support ticket volume spikes for a specific customer, triggers an account review before escalation. All of these things are easier said than done, no question. But the companies building for this now are going to look very different from the ones who aren't in 2 or 3 years. And we believe that's a shift worth paying attention to. So hopefully this gave you all some guidance, direction, or at least provoke some thoughts. Things will continue to evolve, and these questions will become, yesterday's questions. But as my old high school teacher used to say, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. So we just wanted to give you some food for thought. Now I'll flip it back to Ariel to close this up.
Yeah. Thanks, Dustin. Thank you, Brendan. And exactly as Brendan said, I like the freakish pace at which things are changing. These 3 tomorrow questions will be yesterday's before we know it. So if you are contemplating a platform switch, a migration, if you are already on Dynamics and asking yourself some of these questions, we would love to keep the conversation going. Or if we've missed your question, we'd love to answer it. So you can always reach us at Route 16. And thank you so much for attending the Better Questions virtual event today. And good luck on all of your platform decisions. And we hope to hear from you and hear what questions you're asking as you're making these decisions.